the angel number that shows up only when you're about to give up. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from working too hard. It comes from holding on too long. And if you are feeling that right now, if something inside you is quietly, almost imperceptibly beginning to release, then what I am about to tell you matters more than you may realize. Because there is an angel number that does not appear during your best moments. It does not show up when things are going well, when you feel aligned, when the path ahead is clear. It appears in a very specific window of human experience. The window right before someone gives up on something that mattered deeply to them. And if you have been seeing repeating numbers lately while feeling like you are running out of reasons to continue, you need to hear this. This number found you, not randomly, not coincidentally. It found you because you are standing at one of the most spiritually significant thresholds a person can reach. And before you take another step in any direction, you deserve to understand what that means. You deserve to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of what feels from the inside, like exhaustion or failure, or the quiet dissolution of something you once believed in completely. Before I tell you which number this is, I need you to understand why it only appears when you're this close to letting go. The moment nobody talks about. Nobody talks about what it actually feels like from the inside. The movies have a version of giving up, dramatic, tearful, loud. But the real version is quieter than that. It is the morning you wake up and the first thought is not hope or planning or even worry. It is a kind of silence where something used to be. It is the exhaustion that sleep does not fix. The kind that lives in your chest, not your body. The kind that makes even small tasks feel like they require a decision you no longer have the energy to make. You move through your day completing things because you still know how. But the interior engine that once made those things feel worth completing has gone very quiet. You are still functioning. But something beneath the functioning has changed. Something load-bearing has shifted. You are not sad exactly. You are emptied. And there is a part of you, a very quiet, very reasonable part, that has begun to wonder whether continuing makes sense anymore. Not in a dramatic way. In the way a candle begins to consider the dark. Slowly. Without crisis. With a kind of tired logic that feels, in its own way, completely rational. This is the moment spirituality rarely addresses with honesty. Most spiritual content will tell you to raise your vibration, to stay positive, to trust the process. But almost none of it will look directly at this specific experience and say, what you are feeling right now is not a failure of faith. It is a threshold. It is not evidence that you chose the wrong path. It is evidence that you have walked far enough along a particular path to reach its natural boundary. Across mystical traditions, across depth psychology, across the documented inner lives of people who have undergone genuine transformation, this moment has a name. It is the liminal point, the edge between what was and what has not yet become visible. It is not comfortable. It was never meant to be. Comfort belongs to the middle of a cycle, not its boundary. The boundary is designed to be felt. It is designed to be undeniable, because the only way through a genuine threshold is to actually arrive at it, not to bypass it, not to think your way past it, but to stand there long enough to understand what it is asking of you. And what makes this moment spiritually unusual is not its pain. It is its precision. The liminal point does not arrive randomly. It arrives when a cycle has genuinely reached its edge. When what you have been carrying has taken you as far as it can take you. When the next movement requires something that the current form of what you are holding cannot provide. When the version of you that began this journey has done everything it came to do. And the only way forward is to release that version and become something that has not yet been named. Most people interpret this feeling as a sign that something has gone wrong. But in the architecture of genuine transformation, this feeling is a sign that something has gone right, that a cycle has completed its work, and that the next chapter is waiting on the other side of a release you have not yet been willing to make. And the people who have stood exactly where you are standing right now, many of them started seeing the same number. Why this number appears at the edge? The number is 999, not 111, which appears during new beginnings, not 444, which appears during periods of foundation and stability, not 555, which signals incoming change. 999 is different. Its appearance is calibrated to a specific emotional and spiritual condition, and that condition is completion. In sacred numerology, 9 is the number of endings, of cycles closing, of what has been carried reaching the end of its natural lifespan. It is the final single digit, the one that contains all the others within it and then releases them. And when it appears 3 times as 999, its message is not amplified in volume. It is concentrated in precision. It is not louder. It is deeper. It is not telling you more of the same thing. It is telling you one thing with total clarity. 999 does not appear when you are building something. It appears when something is finishing. And the reason it finds people at the edge of giving up is because giving up and completion are not always different things. This number exists in part to help you feel the difference between the two, to help you know whether what you are releasing is something that has run its course or something that is about to open. That distinction is everything. And 999 carries it. Most people who begin seeing 999 interpret it as a bad sign, as confirmation that something is ending, that loss is coming, that they should brace for what is about to be taken. That interpretation is understandable. We are conditioned to associate endings with failure, with loss, with something going wrong. The culture we live in treats completion as defeat, unless it arrives exactly when and how we planned it. But that reading misses the deeper register of what this number carries. In the spiritual traditions that first mapped the meaning of repeated numerical patterns, 9 was never considered a number of loss. It was considered a number of wisdom earned through completion. It is the number that arrives not to take something from you, but to show you what has already been accomplished, and to prepare you for what cannot begin until this chapter closes. It is the number of the harvest, not the failure. The recognition of what has been built, not the erasure of it. 999 is not a warning. It is a marker. And what it is marking is more significant than most people realize, because it's not telling you to hold on. It's telling you something completely different. The spiritual mechanics of surrender. There is a distinction that changes everything, and it is this. Giving up and letting go are not the same spiritual act. Giving up is driven by exhaustion. It is the release of something because you no longer have the energy to hold it. It is reactive, involuntary, and often followed by grief. Not because the thing itself was wrong to release, but because the release was not chosen. It happened to you. You did not decide to put something down. It slipped from your hands, and in that slipping, something is lost that could have been kept. Not the thing itself, but the meaning of its release. The awareness of what was actually happening. Letting go is something else entirely. It is the conscious recognition that a cycle has completed, that what you have been holding has fulfilled its purpose, and that holding it further would not be devotion. It would be resistance to a movement that is already in progress. Letting go, in its truest form, is not weakness. It is the most precise kind of awareness. The recognition that a form has completed its function, and that clinging to it would cost you the very thing it was trying to deliver. What happens at the threshold where 999 appears is something specific. The effort of carrying what you have been carrying has brought you to a state of permeability. The psychological and emotional structures that normally keep certain realizations at arm's length have been worn thin. You are, in the most literal sense, more open than you usually are. The walls are lower. The defense is quieter. The interior space more available to something that could not reach you when everything was intact and armored. This thinning is not comfortable, but it is functional. It is the mechanism by which the message of 999 reaches you. This is not weakness. In Hermetic tradition, this dissolution is understood as a necessary precondition for transformation. Carl Jung wrote about the moment the ego releases its grip, not as collapse but as the beginning of a deeper integration. Mystics across centuries have described the experience of being emptied as the prerequisite for being filled with something that could not have entered otherwise. You cannot pour new water into a vessel that is already full. The emptying is not the problem. The emptying is the point. 999 appears at this threshold precisely because this permeability, makes you capable of receiving its message in a way that would be impossible during ordinary stability. When everything is fine, when the structure holds, when the identity feels secure, the message of 999 would slide past you unnoticed. You would see the number and feel nothing particular. But here at the edge, where the usual defenses have softened, where the interior is more available than it normally is, the message can land where it was always intended to reach. In the place beneath the decisions, in the place where you actually know things, which means the fact that you're seeing this number right now is not a warning. It's a marker. And what it's marking is more significant than you think. What the number is actually trying to tell you. Here is what 999 is not saying. It is not saying keep going. It is not saying you are almost there, that the finish line is close, that everything you have been working toward is about to arrive. That is not the message of this number. And feeling that pressure when you see it, the pressure to stay, to push, to endure, is a misreading that can cause real harm. It can keep someone locked in a form that has genuinely completed, straining toward an outcome that belongs to a different cycle entirely, grinding against a door that is not meant to open. Because the door that is meant to open is somewhere else. What 999 is actually saying is more disorienting and ultimately more liberating than that. It is saying that the version of you who began this journey was never meant to be the version who finishes it. The exhaustion you are feeling is not evidence that you have failed. It is evidence that a transformation has been happening, quietly, incrementally, beneath the surface of everything you have been consciously trying to manage. The person who started what you are now thinking about releasing was operating from a different set of beliefs, a different emotional architecture, a different understanding of what was possible and what you deserved. That person made decisions based on what they knew then. They held what they could hold then. They moved at the speed they could move then. That version of you built something real, carried something heavy, learned things that could only be learned the way you learned them. There is no shortcut to what that version of you now knows. The knowledge is in the body. It is in the history. It is in the specific texture of what it felt like to carry something this long and this far. And none of that is being erased or invalidated by the exhaustion you are feeling now. The exhaustion is, in a very specific sense, the proof that the work was real. You cannot be this tired from something that did not matter. And now, 999 is appearing to tell you that this cycle, not your life, not your purpose, not your capacity, but this specific cycle, has reached its natural boundary. The person who needs to move forward is not the person who started. It is the person that the journey created, and that person is you now at the edge, tired and awake and more capable of something new than you currently believe. The capability is there. It was built by everything you went through. You simply cannot feel it yet because you are still standing inside the experience that built it. The tiredness is not a flaw in you. It is the sensation of a chapter ending. And once you understand what this number is actually pointing to, the way you see this entire period of your life will shift. The pattern across thousands of people. When you begin to look at the documented accounts of people who have reported seeing 999, not casually, not occasionally, but with the kind of precision and repetition that crosses into undeniable, a pattern emerges that is too consistent to explain away. These are not people who were failing. They are people who were transitioning. People who had been deeply committed to something, a relationship, a career, a version of themselves, a belief system, and had reached the point where continuing felt no longer possible. Not because the thing was bad, but because it was complete. Because it had given them everything it had to give, and they had given it everything they had to give, and the exchange had reached its natural end. The energy between them and the thing they were holding had simply finished moving, and the stillness that followed felt from the inside like failure, when it was actually resolution. The number appears across cultures and spiritual traditions that have no contact with each other. It appears to people who had never heard of angel numbers and to people who had been working with them for years. It appears in clusters, meaning not once, but repeatedly, across days or weeks, in contexts that feel increasingly difficult to dismiss, on receipts, on license plates, in timestamps, in page numbers, in phone numbers dialed by mistake, with a frequency and a placement that begins to feel less like coincidence and more like insistence. like something trying to make sure you notice, like something that will not let itself be ignored. And the one thing almost all of these people have in common is not their circumstances. Their circumstances vary enormously. Some were ending relationships, some were leaving careers, some were releasing identities, versions of themselves they had performed for so long they had forgotten they were performing. Some were letting go of beliefs that had organized their entire inner world. Some were releasing expectations they had carried since childhood, without ever fully realizing they were carrying them. The situations were different. The geography of the loss was different. The specific content of what was ending was different for every single person. What they share is a feeling, a specific, quiet, interior feeling of being at the end of something without yet being able to see what comes after. The feeling of standing in a doorway with no visible room beyond it, present enough to know you are at a threshold, not yet far enough through to know what waits on the other side. That precise, suspended, almost unbearable state of being between what was and what has not yet revealed itself. The number does not appear to people who are comfortably settled. It appears to people who are standing at an edge, often without fully understanding that that is where they are. And when you hear what that one thing is, you'll understand exactly why this number found you. The hidden significance of crisis. The word crisis comes from the Greek crisis, meaning decision or turning point, not catastrophe, not ending. Turning point. Across Hermetic tradition, the moment of dissolution, the moment when what has been structured begins to come apart, is not understood as destruction. It is understood as the necessary preceding condition for a higher order of integration. You cannot build a new form inside a container that is already full. Something has to empty first. And the emptying is not the tragedy. The emptying is the preparation. The discomfort of dissolution is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that something is in the process of becoming more than it currently is. Carl Jung described what he called the night sea journey, the mythological and psychological experience of descent into darkness, of losing the shape of oneself, as a prerequisite for what he called individuation, the emergence of the authentic self from beneath the layers of performance and adaptation. This journey is not optional. It cannot be scheduled. It cannot be bypassed through positive thinking or spiritual discipline alone, and it almost always feels from the inside like things are falling apart, because the structures that are dissolving were real, and their dissolution is genuinely uncomfortable. But their dissolution is also the only way through. The night sea journey does not end in drowning. It ends on a different shore than the one you left, and the distance between those two shores is exactly the length of what you are living through right now. The mystics of the Sufi tradition spoke of fana, the annihilation of the self, not as a tragedy, but as a gate. Not the end of the person, but the end of the false architecture the person had constructed around their fear. The constructed self, the performing self, the self that was built to survive a particular environment, that self dissolves, and beneath it, something older and more essential remains. The Hermetic principle of correspondence suggests that what happens at the level of the inner life mirrors, and is mirrored by what happens in outer circumstances. When everything external feels like it is shifting or dissolving, it is because something internal has already shifted, and the outer world is catching up. The outer dissolution is always a reflection of an inner reorganization that has already begun. 999 is calibrated to this threshold because its message only makes sense here. It is not a number for ordinary moments. It is a number for the specific experience of standing at the boundary between who you have been and who you have not yet become. Between the form that carried you to this edge and the form that is waiting to carry you beyond it. It appears here because here is the only place its message can be fully received. And there is something encoded in this number, in its structure, in its digits, in what it represents numerologically, that reveals exactly what kind of transformation is already in motion. What happens if you walk away? This is the question beneath everything else you have been asking yourself. And it deserves an honest answer, not a motivational one. The spiritual understanding of this threshold does not say, do not give up. It says, know what you are releasing and why, and at what point in the cycle the release is happening. The act of releasing is not the problem. The timing and the awareness with which it is done, those are everything. There is a concept in spiritual timing called premature release. It is not a moral failure. It is a mistiming. The act of releasing something at the point in its cycle, just before the form it has been building toward, becomes visible. Not because you should have pushed harder, but because the exhaustion arrived slightly before the opening. Because the timing of the inner collapse and the timing of the outer emergence did not align. And walking away in that narrow gap meant leaving without what the entire journey was moving toward. The gap between the end of effort and the arrival of what the effort was building is often the most difficult place to stand. It asks you to hold something you can no longer feel the reason for holding. And that is precisely when most people let go. What 999 reveals about timing is specific. In numerological cycles, 9 represents the final stage before 1, before the beginning of an entirely new cycle. The completion it marks is not the end of a journey. It is the end of a phase within a journey. And what is released at this point, if released prematurely, is not the struggle. It is the access to what the struggle was building toward. The struggle was the price of admission, and walking away just before the door opens means paying the full price and leaving before collecting what was earned. Not because you were weak, but because the timing of the exhaustion was slightly ahead of the timing of the arrival. This is not a warning designed to keep you locked in something that is genuinely finished. Some things are complete. Some cycles have genuinely run their course and should be released with clarity and dignity. There is real wisdom in knowing when something has served its purpose and when holding on is no longer devotion, but attachment. There is courage in releasing something cleanly, rather than grinding against it until both of you are destroyed. Wisdom sometimes looks like letting go. And sometimes letting go is exactly what 9999 is pointing toward. But there is a difference between releasing something that is finished and releasing something that is about to open, and this number exists precisely to help you feel that difference. The turning point encoded in the number, 999, is not a simple number. Its architecture carries meaning at multiple levels simultaneously, and understanding that architecture changes how you receive its message. The digit 9 on its own is the number of completion, wisdom, and humanitarian depth in classical numerology. It is the number that has traveled through all the others. Through the initiation of 1, the partnership of 2, the creativity of 3, through structure and change and responsibility and inner wisdom, and arrived at a place of wholeness. 9 knows things that earlier numbers do not. It has earned its position at the edge of the cycle. It carries the memory of every stage that preceded it. It is not the number of innocence or beginning. It is the number of someone who has been through something and emerged with understanding that could only have been earned, never simply given. When 9 appears 3 times as 999, the tripling does not mean more of the same. In sacred numerology, repetition of a digit creates resonance. It amplifies not the volume of the message but its dimensional reach. 999 speaks simultaneously to the mental, emotional, and spiritual layers of your experience. It is saying, this completion is not surface level. It is not a single area of your life that is closing. It is happening across the full architecture of who you are. The mental patterns that sustained a particular way of seeing. The emotional habits that organized a particular way of feeling. The spiritual orientation that made a particular kind of meaning. All of them reaching their boundary at once. All of them signaling, in their own register, that what they were built to carry has been carried. This is why the experience of 999 can feel so total. It is not because everything is ending. It is because the completion is happening at depth. At the level where identity is actually formed, not just at the level of circumstances. The circumstances are simply the visible surface of something that is reorganizing at a much deeper level. And 999 is the signal that the reorganization is already in progress. Not approaching. Already happening inside you right now, in ways you will only fully understand later. The final digit in any angel number sequence carries a specific weight. It is the note the message resolves on. In 999, that resolution is 9 again. There is no new digit introduced. The message does not open into something different. It folds back into itself, which means the transformation 999 is pointing to is not located in front of you. It is not waiting somewhere ahead, in a future you have to earn your way into. It is located inside the experience you are already in, inside the exhaustion, inside the edge, inside this exact moment of almost release. The threshold is not somewhere you are traveling toward. You are already standing inside it. You are not approaching the threshold. You are already standing on it. And when you understand what the final digit of this number means on its own, it reframes everything that has been happening to you. How to read the sign without forcing an outcome. The most common mistake people make when they begin receiving a sign like 999 is to immediately ask it, "What should I do?" And that question, while completely understandable, misses the register in which this number operates. 999 is not an instruction. It is a revelation. The difference between those two things is everything. An instruction tells you what to choose. A revelation shows you where you are. And when you try to convert a revelation into an instruction, when you use the appearance of 999 as evidence that you must stay, must leave, must push, must release, you collapse the message into something smaller than what it actually is. You turn a map into a command. And a map used as a command stops being a map. It stops showing you where you are and starts telling you where to go, which means you lose the most important information it was trying to give you. The way to receive 999 correctly is not to ask it what to do. It is to ask it what it is showing you about the nature of this moment. What is completing? What has this cycle taught you that you could not have learned any other way? What version of yourself has been built by everything you have been carrying? And is that version of you the one you want to carry forward into what comes next? These questions are not comfortable. They are not designed to make you feel better immediately. They are designed to make you more honest about where you actually are. These are not rhetorical questions. They are the actual content of the message. They are what 999 is trying to open in you. Not a decision, but an awareness. Not a direction, but a clarity about where you actually are and what has actually been happening beneath the surface of everything you have been managing. The answers to these questions, when you find them, do not tell you what to choose. They tell you who is doing the choosing. And that is a different kind of knowledge entirely. When 999 appears, sit with it rather than act on it immediately. Not because action is wrong, but because the action that emerges from genuine awareness of where you are will be categorically different from the action that emerges from exhaustion or fear. One action comes from clarity. The other comes from wanting the discomfort to stop. And those two actions, even when they look identical from the outside, lead to entirely different places. One continues the journey. The other interrupts it. Not wrongly, but without the awareness that could have made the interruption meaningful. The number did not appear to tell you what to choose. It appeared to make sure you are choosing with awareness. Which brings us to the most important thing this number is trying to show you. Not about your situation, but about you. What comes after the edge? Those who have stood at this exact threshold, the edge where 999 found them, where the exhaustion was real and the reasons for continuing had gone quiet, describe what came after in similar ways, even when their circumstances were entirely different. They do not describe a sudden reversal of fortune. They do not describe the problem resolving itself overnight, the relationship mending instantly, the career shifting without further effort. What they describe is something interior and prior to all of that, something that had to happen inside before anything could shift outside, a kind of internal reorganization that was quiet and almost imperceptible while it was happening. And then, looking back, was the most significant thing that occurred during that entire period. A shift in relationship to the journey itself. Something in them stopped fighting the experience of being where they were. Not resignation, something cleaner than that. A recognition that the edge they had been dreading was not the end of the path. It was a different kind of terrain, quieter, more uncertain, but no longer threatening in the way it had been. The threat had dissolved not because the circumstances changed, but because their relationship to the uncertainty changed. They stopped needing to know what came next in order to take the next step. And in that release of the need to know, something that had been locked began to move. And from that place, not from renewed motivation, not from a sign that everything would work out, not from external confirmation that they were on the right track, but from that specific interior shift, they made their next move. And the move was different from any move they had made before, not louder, not more effortful, but more aligned with who they had actually become through the journey, rather than who they had been when they started it. The move came from a truer place. And because it came from a truer place, it landed differently. It opened things that force had not been able to open. 999 eventually stops appearing. When it does, it is not because the message failed to reach you. It is because the message was received. The cycle it was marking has moved into its next phase. And the next phase has its own numbers, its own signs, its own energetic signature. The silence after 999 is not abandonment. It is confirmation that the threshold has been crossed. It is the signal that what needed to complete has completed, and that what comes next is already beginning to form in the quiet space that the completion left behind. The silence after 999 is not absence. It is the space where something new begins to take shape. You were not meant to arrive at this edge broken. You were meant to arrive here awake, more honest about what you are carrying, more aware of what it has cost you and what it has made you, more capable of the next thing than you were when you began. Even if that capability does not yet feel like strength, it will. Not because someone told you it would, but because what you have been through has already placed it inside you. You simply have not yet stood on the ground where it can be used. The fact that you are watching this right now at this precise moment is not separate from the pattern the number belongs to. It is part of it. The number found you. This found you. Not because you searched in the right place, but because you were ready to receive something you were not ready for before. That readiness was built by everything you went through. The difficulty was not an obstacle to this moment. It was the preparation for it. The number found you because you were ready to understand something you were not ready to understand before. And that understanding is already beginning.